Greetings, everyone. This is Dr. Bill Fisher. I'm on the faculty of the School of Library and Information Science at San Jose State, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the first of our Fall Colloquium Series presentations. With us today is Faye Miller, who is a PhD candidate at Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia. Some of you may be aware of or have heard of Queensland because we have a cooperative program with them. Faye is actually not attending Queensland through our program. She is an Australian and actually lives in Australia and is joining us today to help share some of her information about her current doctoral studies. She's also a lecturer in information and knowledge management at Charles Sturt University in Australia and the University of Canberra in Australia. She has worked in a number of research roles in Australian higher education and is with us today, actually not in Australia, but she happens to be visiting the United States, so she's actually in San Jose. And you'll see Faye in just a second as I turn the mic over to her and welcome her to our colloquium series.
Thank you very much, Bill, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here at San Jose State University today. I am really enjoying my visit here on campus. Today I would like to share some current findings from my doctoral research titled Building Developmental Networks of Early Career Academics, an Informed Learning Perspective. So here's an overview of what I'll be covering today. I'll introduce the topic by talking about the project's history, where the project has come from, and how it has evolved and progressed since 2010. I'll then speak about the context of the research problem, research questions and outcomes, some brief findings from the literature review, my methodology, which is constructivist grounded theory, followed by a discussion of my current findings, and the potential implications and contributions for a number of groups or audiences who may benefit from this study. I'd just like to give a bit of a personal account of my topic. I'd like to speak about where that topic has come from and how it has developed over time. I'd like to speak personally about myself as an emerging researcher, my topic and my research journey so far. So where I've come from, where I'm up to, and where I'd like to take this project. As Bill mentioned, I have been working in the higher education sector for several years, mainly in research support roles and more recently as a sessional academic at both Charles Sturt University and University of Canberra in Australia. I consider myself to be an early career academic as a higher degree research student working on my own research and collaborating with other academics and balancing that with part-time teaching and assessment duties. So this topic for me is quite personally meaningful. If we go back in time and I try to pinpoint when this topic was born, it was probably a few years ago when I had some pretty profound experiences about my true calling and making that decision that yes, I wanted to pursue an academic career and yes, I really was going to tackle that great big mountain they call the PhD. I can talk about it now in a calm and collected way, but at the time I felt as though I was never to be seen again. But then I wondered why I was feeling that way. And after some time, I realized that it was because I managed to isolate myself and there was no need to disconnect when others wanted to help me. So one of the things I had to learn was how to allow others to help me and how to ask for help when I needed it, and also how to give support in return. There's been a lot of talk recently about the future of universities and mentoring new academics to replenish the academic workforce. I have been very fortunate having 3 really great research mentors, but from the perspectives of some of my early career academic colleagues, it has just been a lot of talk and not enough action in this area of supporting new academics. This topic has grown from my own learning experiences, what I learned about myself, developing the confidence to make important decisions in my life, and talking to other early career academics and research students about their learning experiences. Sharing our stories and normalizing these feelings of anxiety or about our failures and mistakes, talking about our issues and being more open about discussing them with everyone, especially those who take an interest in our development both as new and potential academics, and as human beings with lives that go beyond academia. And this is really what I hope to advance. Embarking on this study has definitely helped me grow more confident in all aspects of my life and to learn that work-life balance is really important in being successful. So I think the more we discuss the experiences of early career academics, the more we can help each other learn and grow. It's about being open enough to share our knowledge and our experiences, and I hope this study encourages having that ongoing conversation and a shared understanding between early career academics and all of those people in their networks who support them. The thing I've noticed about early career academics, or anyone entering a new profession for that matter, is that if the right support mechanisms aren't in place, or the new person doesn't have the right skills to use those support mechanisms, then the whole system just collapses. And perhaps more importantly, if the academic doesn't feel supported initially, then all the right information and knowledge needed for them to perform effectively doesn't flow on from that, and again the system collapses. So I ask, how can we avoid that? How can we build the support networks that we need? The metaphor of the spider web was often used by the participants in my study. Universities are complex, ever-changing ecosystems, to use that metaphor. There are a multitude of skills and attributes required to perform all facets of the role, and all rely on information and knowledge, and knowing how and when to use that information and knowledge. Perhaps in times of rapid change, the skill of learning becomes even more important, and in order to learn these new skills and attributes required to progress as early career academics, the ability to use information underpins all of those necessary skills. Information is the molecule or the building block, and how information shapes or influences our learning experiences is kind of a mysterious process. But if we look at the issue of encouraging open communication for early career academics and their support networks, it is obvious that we must work towards a better understanding of what informs learning and how information is experienced for developmental purposes, particularly in a complex learning environment that blends new and traditional ways of communicating and interacting with information and knowledge sources. In terms of my timeline for the project, the research was designed throughout 2010, with the first round of data collection and preliminary data analysis completed in 2011. This was followed by a second round of data collection and final data analysis earlier this year, with findings now being written up for my thesis chapters. And I aim to complete the project by June 2013. So a bit about the research context. The change is a major factor here. Changes in the higher education sector, both in Australia and internationally. We're looking at changes in government policies, changes in work practices, work roles, and work culture in universities. There's an emphasis on a more output-oriented culture and the conception of universities as sources of creativity and innovation in the knowledge economy. Early career academics and the future academic workforce, as I mentioned earlier. There has been a lot of talk in that area recently as we prepare for the future of universities worldwide. Looking at the complexity of their roles, and for this project I focus on the issue of the research-teaching nexus, hence my use of the term early career academics and not just early career researchers. I'm acknowledging the relationship between research and teaching, so that covers a whole range of support networks. Within this context is this complex information and knowledge environment which blends traditional and new ways of interacting and learning within these emerging academic cultures. Just looking at the research problem more closely, the trends that are happening right now, there's a shift occurring from a focus on the individual experience to a relational or collaborative experience. This has been reflected in the recent literature in human resource development, education, information literacy, and information behaviour. The other trend is this increasingly complex information practice, a blend of new and traditional ways of interaction with information in this context, particularly for the beginning university academic. So what we need here is to gain a clearer picture of how early career academics are using information to learn within this complex information practice to build, maintain, and utilize their networks for professional growth and development. And to do that, I'll be using the informed learning concept as developed by Professor Christine Bruce, and I'll be using it as my conceptual framework for this research. The study has two main research questions. How do early career academics use information to learn while building their developmental networks, and also what informs their learning while building developmental networks? The knowledge gained throughout this research will then be applied to produce the following outcomes. A theoretical model of early career academics' use of information to learn how to create and utilize their developmental networks for the purposes of enhancing their research and teaching, and an empirical basis to inform academic development strategies and information development strategies to enhance mentoring, career development, and networking training at universities. Now I'll move on to speaking about my literature review. Just a bit of an introduction. Obviously, this is an interdisciplinary study. It draws together research from a range of fields, including information literacy, information behaviour, higher education, social learning, and human resource development. The main purpose of this initial literature review was to develop a familiarity with the key concepts in my study. So the literature reviews in grounded theory studies are not conducted in depth initially, as the findings from the data analysis will inform later stages of the literature review. So the literature review covers all the key concepts used in the design of the interview guide to have a general understanding of the key concepts and issues and gaps in knowledge related to my topic to effectively participate as a researcher in the interview conversations. The networking in academia section really identified that major shift in the individual experience to relational experience that I mentioned in my research problem earlier. So that relational focus suggests a need for further research in affective or emotional factors to complement the dominant cognitive-based research. The emerging focus on building social networks and human relationships via collaborative technologies and traditional communication methods suggests an increasingly complex use of information and knowledge by university academics. Developmental networking, not much research done in this area in the higher education context, with only one major American study by Baker which examines the nature of developmental networks in the postgraduate research experience. Also studies into supervisory pedagogy and enhancing learning experiences for postgrad students provide valuable insight into the supervisor research-student learning relationships. However, these studies focus on the research context only, so we need more research that encompasses a more holistic view of the early career academic experience. A bit about my methodology. The research exploring early career academics' use of information to learn while developmental networking employed a constructivist grounded theory approach. The paradigm emphasizes personal, subjective making or construction of reality and a multiple realities perspectives approach. Closely related to this paradigm is symbolic interactionism, a perspective which assumes that individuals are active, creative and reflective, and that social life consists of processes. So there are three major theoretical principles of constructivist grounded theory. These are the creation of a sense of reciprocity between participants and the researcher in a co-construction of meaning, and ultimately a theory that is grounded in the participants and research experience. The establishment of relationships with participants that explicate the power imbalances and attempts to modify these imbalances, clarification of the position the author takes in the text, the relevance of biography, and how one renders participant stories into theory through writing. These broad principles were adhered to in working with the early career academics for the following reasons. The notion of co-construction of meaning and theory grounded in both the participants and researchers' experience adds great value to the study to generate new perspectives and concepts that genuinely represent the voices of a somewhat understudied group. Being closely linked to the embryonic concepts of informed learning and developmental networking means the methodology needs to allow for exploration of any connections and interactions between these broad areas. As a researcher has significant work experience in higher education alongside other early career academics, a theoretical sensitivity from the researchers can effectively facilitate the construction of shared meaning or intersubjectivity. When my participant selection, purposive sampling was used to identify and select suitable participants. Participants were selected based on the following criteria. They must be an academic within the first 5 years of a full-time permanent appointment to a university faculty who engages in both teaching and research activities. They must have had significant industry or professional experience before joining the academy, and they must have had experience with networking for professional and personal development towards learning how to be an academic. So in the first round of data collection, participants were identified through searching the university communications directory and academic staff web pages online. So 8 early career academics based on one campus of a regional Australian university within the faculties of education, science and arts agreed to participate in the study. In the second round of data collection, 6 participants from a major metropolitan Australian university were identified through staff directories. These early career academics were located in faculties of science and engineering and business. In total, 14 early career academics across 2 universities participated in this study. Data collection involved individual semi-structured face-to-face interviews with selected early career academics. The individual interviews lasted approximately 45 minutes and were audio taped using a digital voice recorder and then transcribed by the researcher. During the interviews, participants were guided by a set of broad questions. Can you tell me about your position as an early career academic? Can you tell me about your professional experience prior to becoming an academic? Can you tell me about your experiences with developmental networking as an early career academic? And how do you use information to learn? Or what informs you while building your developmental networks? Grounded theory data analysis involves an iterative process, iterative meaning that I keep returning back to various points within the process and revisit. So it's not a linear process, it's continuous. And the data collection and data analysis occur concurrently. It starts with the initial coding and categorizing of interview transcripts. Coding involves going through each interview transcript line by line and identifying the key issues and concepts mentioned. Early coding is called open coding, and the second round of coding is called focus coding, which looks more closely at the emerging concepts. When codes are identified, these are organized into categories which are developed from frequently occurring concepts within the data. Constant comparison technique was used to compare the emerging codes and categories across each interview transcript. When a category has reached saturation point, that means a particular concept has been mentioned by a significant number of participants and no new data can be collected within that category. Memo writing is used to record reflections on various experiences and incidents within the study, and these are used to enhance and flesh out the emerging categories and themes towards grounded theory development. I have one modified interview question which came from a reflective discussion that I had with Professor Christine Bruce about the potentially limiting nature of the second question for a participant, especially when one's conception of information was more in the textual realm and not necessarily in the social. So in order to try and gain a wider range of conceptualizations of information, we have broadened the question to what informs you as you learn to build your developmental networks in an attempt to capture a wider range of experiences that may be occurring. So this conceptual diagram illustrates how early career academics use information to learn while building their networks for professional development. It works towards answering the questions of how early career academics use information, the processes involved as identified from the data, and also what informs their learning. So key concepts within this diagram, first is knowledge as informed learning. So in this study, it is knowledge rather than information, which is recognized by early career academics as a primary resource for their learning and development. The following quotes suggest the idea of knowledge from people as informing the development of their learning network. So information is just a piece of paper until you can relate it to someone knowing who wants it. For the early career academic, information is conceptualized as tangible content or text, a piece of paper, while knowledge is created, knowing who wants it, through the process of relating to the information until you can relate it to someone for a particular purpose such as learning. Information remains important, however, as the next quote suggests. Early career academics place a stronger emphasis on knowledge that is intangible and fluid, particularly knowing the right people in order to access the most relevant and valuable information. So a few quotes here. The really valuable stuff in networking is not the stuff you can find in a journal or website. Benjamin is who you want to speak to, that sort of thing. You know, oh, he's doing the best stuff, you should check it out. But then you might find some of his stuff on his website, but you only know that through your networks. So you have to know someone or you don't have access to that. First, there's intelligence, which is having and knowing plenty of people who will give you information and being able to react to that intelligence very quickly if needed. Intelligence is knowing what's what and being able to take advantage of that. In the next quotes, a further emphasis is placed on accessing knowledge, including skills, as a usable resource for their self-development and simultaneously the development of others, so the team around me. Information for developmental purposes is only accessible through early career academics knowing people and people knowing them. So it's a few quotes here. I think it's not necessarily about the information or content, but more about accessing skills or knowledge. I use the knowledge of others in the network, not only to develop myself, but to develop the team around me. I think that the main form is through the network of people that you know already, because what happens in that is if they think, or I would think that there is something relevant coming up for our development or other research, teaching or servicing, I would touch base with my fellows or peers. I think it is ultimately the most important and the most relevant way in which I get access to information, and in a way it's also how I keep track of my development, my learning. There's the human network that know the sort of person I am, the sort of things I'm interested in, and can piece it together when they come across something, and I'll do the same for them. So the last two quotes there, they suggest that knowledge is created through relating to information. Relating, in this sense, means having the ability to know what's relevant or valuable for theirs or another person's development. In developmental relationships or networks, these intangible knowledge types are shared, or potentially shared within early career academics and their between early career academics and their developers. The following section discusses 5 types of knowledge constructed from the data that informs early career academics learning emerging from the findings. Each knowledge type refers to knowledge co-created in a relationship, so knowledge from the early career academic and knowledge from their developers. So these knowledge types are experiential knowledge, which is knowledge gained and stored in one's memory banks from past experience. Experiential knowledge does not include one's specific expertise in theory, but does include the knowledge associated with one's expertise that informs decisions or judgments related to learning a new task or activity. This includes tacit knowledge or know-how gained from practical experience that may differ or contrast with expert or technical knowledge. Experiential knowledge includes intuition developed over a long period of time that also informs decision-making and the rate at which an action or response can occur. In this way, experiential knowledge is an intuitive way of knowing and using technical expertise. In the context of this study, experiential knowledge can include knowledge gained from being a practitioner or a new academic. There's also technical knowledge. Technical knowledge refers to the knowledge of processes related to technology, skills, scientific expertise, policies and procedures. This knowledge can be found in humans or in databases, for example, how-to guides. As a participant above suggests in her quote, some forms of technical knowledge can only inform her learning to a certain extent, and that experiential knowledge is far more useful for learning her role. Disciplinary knowledge refers to knowledge that is unique to a particular discipline. This means that each discipline has different understandings of particular concepts, or each discipline has contributed specific theories. This knowledge appears more often when interacting within their own discipline and learning more about disciplinary-specific research or teaching. Interdisciplinary knowledge is knowledge gained only from interdisciplinary interaction and collaboration. It is often synthesized from sources of different disciplinary knowledge, such as experts working on a joint project or the project work itself. And the 5th form of knowledge is personal knowledge, which arises from personal or social interaction. Some examples include common sense or survival instinct, interpersonal skills, social savvy, rational and emotional knowledge such as trust and empathy. The study interprets information use as any interaction between people and information sources to create knowledge, whether the knowledge remains implicit or becomes explicit. Interacting with different types of knowledge for learning activities is central to the study's conceptualization of informed learning. Using information to learn is described by every participant in this study as manifested through engaging in development, growth, and/or learning through relationships between people. The following quotes from participant interviews encapsulate this notion. So, early career academics must be able to relate to the information before they can learn. The relationships between people make the learning and knowledge meaningful. What informs me is the relationships that I have, the development of those relationships, and how they grow over time. Learning is informed by anything you receive through your senses that enables you to improve, enables you to do something at a better capacity than you had previously done. To me, that's what a network is. It's not just people, it's text you read, it's articles you read, it's blogs, podcasts, it's everything. While each of these quotes expresses the importance of human relationships and relating to information for learning, the second quote places a further emphasis on the relationship itself and some of its various dimensions as informing one's learning. This difference in conceptualizing the relationships approach suggests that there are at least two ways of experiencing informed learning in this context. So one, early career academics learning being informed by their developmental relationships. So this is what I call the inner focus. And the second one is suggested by the third quote, early career academics relationships being informed by a variety of sources. So this is what I call outer focus. This presentation will discuss what is meant by inner focus, comprised of concepts such as knowing self, knowing others, and layering of relationships. So when we talk about inner focus, learning from knowledge within developmental relationships, this view places a focus on the knowledge generated from interaction within relationships in a developmental network. This is an inner focus which concentrates on the relationships themselves as knowledge contexts. So to build on this notion of human relationships in response to either of the open-ended questions posed, each participant suggested and discussed the idea of reciprocity as being critical to successful creation and maintenance of developmental relationships and networks. Such reciprocal relationships are conceptualized as being mutually supportive in that they provide benefits in the form of information, learning, and support to the early career academics and those people who act as their mentors. A developer in this study refers to someone who does not act as a mentor but still has a significant impact on the early career academics learning, such as a colleague, a friend, or a relative. Data analysis involves the construction of a variety of ways in which early career academics use information to learn while building mutually beneficial relationships and networks. So the main processes identified which enable reciprocal interactions between early career academics and their developers are knowing self, knowing others, and recognizing layers of relationships. So this presentation will focus on how they use self-knowledge and knowledge of others to build their developmental networks. So knowing self, knowledge of one's own beliefs, preferences, experience, expertise, skills, capacities, and needs in a holistic sense is key to establishing and maintaining developmental relationships. Developing an awareness of and learning about oneself as a source of information and knowledge can enhance the quality of the relationships within the network. The focus here is on how the early career academic informs the development of a network or relationship, as the following quote conveys. You've really got to get a sense when accessing a network of not only what I can get from the network, but what I can bring to it. They're always very generous, but I think it appropriate to actually have a sense of what you're bringing to it as opposed to what you can get out of it if you expect them to cooperate with you for very long. So that sense of reciprocity. Self-knowledge can also inform early career academics' decisions about which relationships, networks are most suitable and most effective for their own development. For example, participants discuss service activities both within and outside the university context, such as volunteering to participate in academic committees, reviewing government policy documents, or advising about educational technology use and sharing this knowledge. So these activities allow the early career academic to offer their self-knowledge for the benefit of others as a way of building and strengthening networks for developing their teaching and research. The following 6 activities emerging from the data begin to illustrate the process of how early career academics interact with their self-knowledge to learn while networking. So the first is identifying. The first step in the process of learning in the self-knowledge context involves early career academics identifying critical information from personal experience towards forming an academic focus or niche. The next is testing. This activity involves early career academics testing out or evaluating a variety of information or knowledge for personal relevance or suitability for developmental purposes. It is related to the processes of experimenting and keeping an open mind about what informs their learning, so having an open, inquisitive approach. Feeling involves interacting with emotional aspects of personal knowledge, involves feeling particular emotional states that inform early career academics development. So based on emotional aspects of their personal knowledge, early career academics choose a particular course of action that can either help or hinder their learning and subsequent development. The feeling process is underlying each phase of the self-knowledge development and is central to learning while developmental networking. Discovery. This activity relates to early career academics discovering self-knowledge to arrive at certain realizations or understanding of oneself. So early career academics' discovery of self-knowledge can involve the use of their own experiential and personal knowledge over time to realize or to become consciously aware of what has not been known about themselves before. So it is the act of bringing to consciousness a new perspective, idea, or concept that existed in one's mind but had remained latent and triggered by interaction with insight from experiential or personal knowledge. Reflecting, the activity involves interacting with rational and emotional aspects of personal and experiential knowledge through deliberate introspection. This process comprises of thinking about and analyzing experiences of relationships and networks to increase self-knowledge. The act of reflecting allows early career academics to make informed decisions about their networking prior to engaging in the next step of the process of offering self-knowledge. So the activity of offering self-knowledge involves contributing all types of knowledge to build a relationship with a developer or potential developer. At the same time, learning while building networks is informed by their knowledge or their perception of others. In terms of creating broader networks, one participant describes this experience as, I know everyone who works in my area, I know who they are, and I make an effort to interact with them and help them and give them information. So there's that kind of broader intelligence of knowing what's going on. That means people think of you when they're thinking of who would we put on this committee, or we need an advisory panel and who would you ask. Similarly, in an effective mentoring relationship, knowing how one benefits their mentor helps in building reciprocity. Mentoring is a two-way thing, and often it's about someone senior recognizing that someone has the ability to make money for you or help you. And I guess even now I look at people and think this person could actually be quite good. So it's worth me spending money to take them to a meeting because I can see some advantage in it. In this way, the reciprocal nature of the developmental relationship enhances the perceived quality of learning while building networks. The following 6 processes emerging from the data illustrate how early career academics interact with the knowledge of others to learn while networking. The first is accessing. So this activity involves knowing how to access various types of knowledge from developers or potential developers within their network. The second is monitoring. The activity of monitoring involves early career academics maintaining an awareness of other people's personal, disciplinary and interdisciplinary knowledge to learn their roles. Aligning involves early career academics joining and adapting to existing and new developmental networks. Seeking involves the academics seeking out other people's knowledge to inform their development. So early career academics mainly seek experiential, technical, disciplinary and interdisciplinary knowledge to inform a range of tasks involved in learning their roles. Applying, this activity involves applying and demonstrating what they have learned from other people in their networks. In this activity, the academics are using experiential, technical, disciplinary and interdisciplinary knowledge gained from interaction with developers. And sharing. This activity involves sharing all types of knowledge to build networks, and this differs from the offering of self-knowledge. Sharing knowledge with others also involves sharing knowledge gained from others and knowing the overall impact if it is shared. So the diagram also shows that building relationships occurs mainly in the informal sphere with different types of learning experienced by early career academics in the informal, non-formal, and formal spheres. Just a bit about the contributions, a discussion of my findings in that sense. Recent reviews of developmental networking as a general human resource development strategy highlight the importance of the mutuality perspective. So findings from this current study of early career academics reflect the reciprocal nature of successful contemporary developmental relationships. To build further on this perspective, the informed learning framework, with its dual focus on information use and learning, allows the researchers to work towards revealing what informs early career academics learning while developmental networking. Firstly, mutually supportive relationships comprised of the early career academic self-knowledge, knowledge of others, and various relationship layers can be linked to research into early career practitioners, particularly the concepts of relational and individual agencies, as discussed by authors such as Edwards and Darcy, Hopwood and Sutherland, and Warhurst. As participants each discuss both working collaboratively and independently according to their learning needs and situations, this study suggests that a combination or balance of relational knowledge of others and individual self-knowledge informs learning and growth. For these capacities to be successfully developed, we must first understand what informs such learning and how this informed learning varies across different situations. Secondly, this study indicates the use of or interaction with informal information much closer. This needs much closer attention. Literature on learning informally in higher education is focused on information sharing while social networking. However, information use for learning and professional development is a different context, and the use of information to enhance quality of learning needs further research. In general, strategies to facilitate informal interactions through relationships of mutual benefit are needed. Academic developers for teaching, research, and career, mentors, formal and informal, early career academics, and information and knowledge managers within higher education. We all need to collaborate to enhance learning within the informal sphere. This could involve providing opportunities and support for informal interaction and informal information use both online and offline to develop personalized developmental networks towards quality learning experiences for early career academics and their successful development of relational and individual agencies. So just to conclude, themes of human relationship building and developmental networking in the context of the growing use of social collaborative technologies blended with traditional communication methods suggest an increasingly complex experience for information and knowledge use, particularly for the beginning university academic. The notion that information and learning are inextricably linked via the concept of informed learning deserves further attention in a complex practice such as developmental networking. In an in-depth study of this issue from an informed learning perspective has the potential to contribute to improving holistic support for early career academics and also to the higher education and human resource development sectors more broadly. So providing detailed insights into what informs early career academics' development of the self, as well as key relationships from research, teaching, collegial, mentoring, and personal spheres may prove to be a useful platform on which components of academic development could be built. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Faye. Very nice presentation. We're going to open things up to questions. So if someone has a question, you can either put something into the chat box or raise your hand. I do want to make a comment or two aimed predominantly at our students, and then I do have a question for you, Faye. But first of all, if anybody is thinking in terms of pursuing an advanced degree after your MLIS at some point, this was a wonderful example of the process that Faye went through, from her initial introduction to how she got the idea to her discussion of her research and the implications for the findings, etc. Very, very nicely done in that regard, and this is how you take a study like that and begin to work with it prior to the actual dissertation being finished and being approved and everything like that. So it's an exemplary model in that regard, in my opinion. My question for Faye is, with regard to your findings and what you've discussed, A, do you feel that your research is applicable? And then if the answer is yes, to what degree or how so? Do you think it's also applicable not only to early career academics from the faculty perspective, but also is it applicable to students who are coming back and are in programs, especially programs that are totally online, like ours, like San Jose State? And are there things in your research that can potentially help students have a better educational experience while they're still in school?
Okay, thank you, Bill. Yeah, that is a great question, and it's obviously something that I've thought about myself, being a PhD student, and obviously a lot of my participants are also PhD students while working. I think that it doesn't really matter whether they have the professional experience or not, or whether somebody is just a full-time student, because I think that a lot of the issues that I'm finding, and obviously today I haven't touched on all of my findings. There are other things there that are obviously applicable to online education as well, and that is a big area. So yeah, I definitely think that there will be some implications for higher education students, and whether so Christine Bruce has actually done some work into pedagogy for higher degree research students, and some of that work will be used because there are some things that are linked in with the findings that I'm coming up with at the moment.
Great, thank you, Faye. So if any of our participants have any questions, now's the time to either add something into the chat box, or if you click on your microphone, you'll be able to ask Faye a question directly.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Her question is, do you have any specific online networks that have been most helpful to you building networks? Okay, well that's an interesting question. That touches in, goes into looking at social networking online for learning, and that a lot of my participants mentioned things like looking at well, there are, believe it or not, educational sites through through Facebook, and I think most of my participants use LinkedIn a lot when joining some of their professional organizations. So learning through those sort of online groups, I think, is a major finding as well. So yeah, how they go about using that knowledge gained through online networks, and then using that for their learning how to be an academic.
And I would suspect and in fact hope that some of the universities that they may be a part of may have internal systems whereby faculty are able to interact
Sure.
with each other.
Yeah.
And so those may not become readily available to us outside the university, because I know that we do a lot of stuff with our part-time faculty to sort of keep them connected to what's going on at both SLIS itself as well as San Jose State.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, internal social networking is also another finding of mine, which I will discuss later in next chapters that I'm writing currently. But that is also a theme that popped up quite a lot when we talked about internal, and how that changes the whole nature of the work flow within universities. So things like that. Okay, Sybil has sent through a question. Thank you, Sybil. How would you develop more informal spaces online? That is a very good question. Yeah. So, well, obviously, when we look again at social networking, a lot of my participants mentioned that they use sort of informal like Facebook or Twitter, those sorts of things as informal spaces, and just looking at the nature and the patterns of use of those social networking sites, and then how that knowledge gained from what kinds of knowledge were gained from interaction within those sites, and then how that sort of translates back into sort of the physical communication. So yeah, there's a whole blend of communication modes now. So that also obviously affects, as I said, like the workflows and the work culture within universities. But yeah, that is a very good question, and it's something that I would definitely like to think more about now that I'm developing a clearer picture of what's happening, and towards like the end of my study, I will probably be able to answer that question a little more clearly, but at the moment I'm just gathering some understanding of that. But thank you. That is a great question, and I will keep it in mind. Thanks.
Well, and that kind of brings to mind a question that you really didn't get into. You talked a little bit about your participants and how that they had been in academia for under 5 years and did have some industry experience. Sure. But my question would then be, what was like the median age of your participants? Because I would think that younger people would begin to develop some of those informal spaces online more naturally, taking sort of the generational theory approach that if they may be new to academia but not kids, if you will, and they may still be struggling with some of the technology as opposed to younger academics that have been dealing with this stuff as they grew up.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that is definitely something that is a major issue, obviously. But we've also, I would say that the median age for my participants is probably about 38, around there. So yeah, I think, but the major issue too was that they were not just using Facebook or Twitter just because they were in a younger age group. It was looking at use of it in a critical sort of way, so how useful to their particular developmental situation was, how useful that social networking technology was for them to actually develop their academic work. So something like Facebook, in a sense that there were certain things within Facebook that were not actually helpful. So just knowing the difference, and I suppose that's a form of literacy in itself, that knowing how to use the social networking sites more effectively, and not just using it because they're of a younger age group or they like to use it. Okay, we have another question. Did they use Second Life or anything within real time? No, Second Life was not mentioned by the participants that I interviewed. I'm not sure what you mean by anything within real time.
Well, this session would be considered real time, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Potentially a lot of web conferencing, or at least web conferencing where you can't go back and listen to the recording later.
Yeah, definitely.
You need to be there.
Yeah. Live webinars were mentioned as very useful for people who couldn't actually, at that level of academia, couldn't actually travel to the conference. So virtual networking was a big area, being able to do this online, obviously, such as what we're doing today. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Any further questions from our participants? Okay, I don't see anybody with the icon indicating they're typing, or anybody going for the microphone. So let me again thank Faye for her presentation and being with us and being willing to share her research with us while she's visiting the U.S. Let me thank our participants, and of course thank Randy Chang, our IT specialist, who helps us keep everything looking very seamless. And again, thank you all for helping us kick off our colloquium series for fall 2012. Thank you.